UK and Argentina are again facing tensions over the Falkland Islands, prompting the Royal Air Force to issue its highest alert and monitor Argentina closely. As of May 1st, the RAF is maintaining this alert to defend the Falklands. Air Chief Marshal Harb Smith said the UK will not compromise on defending its territory and is ready to deploy to protect citizens. This situation escalated quickly. The UK's strong stance is partly due to actions by the US. Reuters reported on April 23rd that an internal document by Elbris Paul, Deputy Minister in charge of War Policy, was released. This document contained a list of disadvantageous measures targeting NATO allies that were uncooperative with military support in the current Middle East war. There were two particularly notable countries, the UK and Spain. The UK and Spain did not provide support for the US in the Middle East war. Although the UK later opened its air bases, it still went against US interests. The document suggested Spain be expelled from NATO and urged the US to rethink its position on the UK's Falkland Islands sovereignty. The US began retaliatory pressure against the UK and Spain. In particular, the Falkland Islands are one of the most sensitive territorial issues for the UK. The Falkland Islands are a South Atlantic archipelago about 500 kilometers east of the southern Patagonian coast of South America. The islands were initially uninhabited until France settled there in 1764 before the UK later took control. But of course, this area is extremely far from the UK. Argentina claims that Britain's occupation is illegal, citing geographical proximity and historical grounds. In fact, in April 1982, Argentina launched a major invasion operation against the Falkland Islands. Of course, the UK sent out a carrier task force and managed to force Argentina's surrender in just 74 days, but over 900 people died on both sides. Of course, just because Argentina lost the war didn't mean the territorial dispute was over. The conflict over sovereignty continued. In 2013, a referendum was held in the Falklands, and 99.8% of the voters chose to remain with the UK. Based on this, the UK refused to negotiate. But the problem is that in 2026, the situation completely changed when the US signaled that it might reconsider its previous stance on the Falklands sovereignty issue. Until now, the US has officially remained neutral, but has effectively recognized the UK's administrative authority. However, recent documents and statements indicate this balance is beginning to change. The side that moved the fastest to take advantage of this gap was Argentina. The current president, Javier Milei, is considered a representative pro-Trump figure and has strengthened political cooperation based on his personal relationship with Donald Trump. This relationship has gone beyond simple diplomacy and has developed into strategic cooperation, with Argentina using this to bring the Falklands issue back onto the international agenda. In fact, President Milei has repeatedly asserted sovereignty over the Malvinas in public, stirring both domestic and international opinion. Vice President Villarruel is also taking a more aggressive stance than ever, declaring that the Malvinas are Argentine territory. Furthermore, Vice President Villarruel stated that discussions about our islands should take place between nations, and that the UK must engage in bilateral talks with Argentina regarding our claims, which are based on legal, historical, and geographical grounds. At the government level, Argentina has reaffirmed its position that the Falklands are Argentine territory and has demanded that the UK resume bilateral negotiations. Improving relations with the US is the most important variable from Argentina's perspective, because even a signal that Washington is not fully siding with the UK allows Argentina to secure diplomatic initiative. As a result, the Falklands issue is no longer just a regional dispute, but is expanding into a multi-layered diplomatic conflict involving the US, the UK, and Argentina. As the situation escalated, the US State Department moved quickly to respond. In an official briefing on April 24, they stated that their position on the islands remains neutral, while acknowledging that there are conflicting sovereignty claims between the UK and Argentina. At the same time, they also mentioned that in practice, the UK administers the area. On the surface, this statement appears to be an effort to ease tensions, but in reality, it has led to various interpretations. The key point in this statement is the use of the word neutral. Until now, the US has officially not recognized either side's sovereignty, but in practice, it has maintained a stance of supporting the UK's administrative structure. This statement is seen as signaling a return to the original balance. For the UK, it suggests a further weakening of its previous implicit support. The main concern is how neutral is perceived by the international community. This is because it could reinforce the perception that the Falkland Islands are not a stable overseas territory managed by the UK, but rather an unresolved disputed area. This is a very sensitive diplomatic issue. The UK has so far treated this issue as effectively resolved based on the residents' right to self-determination and de facto control, but with just one expression from the US, it has been dragged back into the center of controversy. This remark is creating a very favorable environment for Argentina. The signal that the US is not clearly taking the UK's side gives Argentina more room to raise its voice in the international community. Argentina is leveraging this trend to boost its diplomatic efforts and push the Falklands issue back onto the negotiating table. The US State Department's recent remarks aim to ease tensions, but for the UK, they actually increase strategic pressure. As clear support from its ally becomes uncertain, the Falklands issue is again facing instability. That's why the UK has also placed its air force on highest alert and is taking a strong stance. So what would actually happen if a war were to break out? The British Navy is much weaker now than it was in the past. The British Navy mobilized 127 ships to retake the Falklands, though some were not directly part of the Navy, causing a slight discrepancy in numbers. Currently, there are only 63 British Navy ships, including support vessels. The Navy's size has dropped significantly. If Argentina invades the Falklands, Britain will likely face many difficulties. However, there's an even bigger problem. The Argentine Navy is also near collapse. The only ships the Argentine military has that could directly face the British Navy are destroyers and corvettes. But the big problem is that all of these ships are outdated. These ships entered service in the 1980s. Additionally, the Argentine Air Force is very weak. After the Falklands War, Britain did everything possible to stop Argentina from having fighter jets. Britain blocked other countries from selling fighter jets to Argentina because the jets had British-made parts. Right now, the only weapons the Argentine Air Force can deploy to the Falklands are 23 A-4 Skyhawk attack aircraft. They do have 6 F-16 fighter jets, but since they can't be refueled in the air, they can't be sent to the Falklands. Because of this, the prevailing opinion is that Argentina wouldn't dare attack the Falklands. In addition, there are always 4 Eurofighter jets stationed in the Falklands, and 1 Skysaber air defense system is deployed there, making it a region that's not easy for Argentina to attack. On top of that, the UK has established a system that allows them to quickly deploy their air force to the area. They can dispatch a squadron in no time. Because of this, at the present time, it's unlikely that Argentina will take immediate military action. Both their naval and air force capabilities have been significantly weakened compared to the past, and their ability to carry out long-range operations is also limited. It's a heavy burden for them to launch an actual attack against the Falklands. Although the UK has reduced its military size, it remains superior in long-range deployment and air force power, with a permanent defense system in the Falklands. Given this gap, military conflict is too risky for Argentina. However, the shift in the United States' attitude has changed the situation. From the moment the United States began to emphasize neutrality instead of clear support, Argentina was able to secure diplomatic room to maneuver. Previously, the implicit support of the United States served as a shield for the United Kingdom, but now that barrier is now being seen as partially weakened. This change is influencing diplomatic strategy more than military action. Argentina is actively seeking to capitalize on this opportunity. They are trying to bring the Falklands issue back into the spotlight in the international community and increase pressure to bring the United Kingdom to the negotiating table. The foreign ministry and political leaders have also been making hardline statements in that same vein. This is a dual strategy to strengthen internal unity while also sending a message to the outside world. Diplomatic disputes will likely become more prominent than military conflict going forward. With the United States' position not yet fully fixed, Argentina will likely use this time to broaden its support base and strengthen its case. If this trend continues, the Falklands issue could once again expand into a long-term international dispute, and tensions are likely to gradually increase. The most important thing is that the situation will largely depend on how the United States' intentions change. Will President Trump really abandon the UK and choose Argentina?